What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back on the video. This week, y'all requested a breakdown between Travis Etienne, Isiah Pacheco, and Josh Jacobs. It is a super important draft decision that a ton of you are going to come down to this season. They go in that general late second to like mid-third round range, and especially if you guys want to start off with some of these awesome wide receivers, you're going to come to this decision in round 3 and be like, okay, maybe I've started off wide receiver, or maybe you start off running back, wide receiver, and you want to secure 2 in the first 3 rounds. This is a trio that is oftentimes there that you will need to figure out who you want to draft. So sit back, hit the like button. Let's get things started off with Travis Etienne. Etienne was drafted in the late first round by the Jaguars in 2022, and he's been given a monster workload in each season. As a rookie, he handled 220 carries, committed 45 targets, turned that in to 1,441 yards and just 5 touchdowns. The Jaguars were 9th in scoring that season, but 61% of the touchdowns did come through the air. Plus, Trevor Lawrence did siphon away 5 rushing touchdowns himself. Etienne was actually given 10 carries from inside the 5-yard line. He was just super inefficient with those carries, only converting 2 for touchdowns. 14 other players that season had at least 10 carries from inside the 5, and none of them scored fewer than 4 touchdowns. He also had like a semi-disappointing season in the receiving game. It's tough to say because like he was super like efficient when he got a target. It was just that we were anticipating him earning targets at a much higher rate, especially given how much he played. Like he ended up playing a lot as a rookie. We certainly were hoping for more, like given how much he played, more than 45 targets. Like, had he played less and earned 45, it'd have been like, okay, wasn't on the field that much, still earned targets. I mean, given how much he played, we were expecting closer to like 50 receptions. To address these concerns, because I think the team thought that as well, they drafted Tank Bigsby in round 3 last season. Their plan was to use Tank near the goal line because Etienne was so inefficient the season before, and to kind of mix him in on passing downs because he was decent in the receiving game in college. Again, those were 2 kind of areas that Etienne struggled a little bit as a rookie. The problem was Etienne absolutely was terrible as a rookie last season, averaged a pathetic 2.64 yards per carry, was a complete non-factor in the receiving game. He did convert his only 2 carries from inside the 5-yard line into touchdowns, but that was basically the only bright spot of a terrible rookie season. They just did not trust him at all. And so that resulted in Etienne handling 325 touches and scoring 12 touchdowns. The touchdowns, honestly, I think, was just a complete opposite end of variance from the year before. He got a little bit unlucky as a rookie, only scoring 5 times, but he got, pretty lucky to score 12 times last season. He actually had fewer carries from inside the 20, 10, and 5 last season compared to his rookie season. He just got more lucky converting those into touchdowns. I feel like if we just kind of simulated both of those years out, a million times, on average, he's going to hover around that average, around like 8 or 9 touchdowns, high end last year, low end as a rookie. So what do we expect this season from Etienne? Thus far, the Jaguars have decided to keep only Etienne and Tank Bigsby as their lead backs. I thought that they would either draft a running back relatively early. There were no running backs this season that were really worth super early picks, but I thought they would try and go after someone in that like round 3-4 range. I thought maybe if they don't do that, they would bring in a decent free agent, maybe trade for someone who's kind of like on the fringes. And that could still happen. We could still see a situation both with Etienne and with Pacheco, who we're going to get to in a second, where like, maybe in August, we get people who are at the end of these rotations, like your Miles Sanders, your Damian Pierces of the world, that would potentially get cut, and teams are like, instead of cutting them, maybe I can trade them away for depth somewhere else. So that could potentially happen. I feel like because it's a possibility for both Pacheco and Etienne, we're going to kind of throw that to the side a little bit and say, if you're entering camp with these running back rooms, that's probably what you're designing your offense around. You can't just hope that another team is maybe going to want to cut someone that you could add. You got to assume that this is basically the room they're looking at. So what did they do was almost nothing. I mean, now they have Ernest Johnson. They did spend a late 5th round pick on, I think it's called Keelan Robinson. I think Keelan's how you say his first name. He's not anything good. I mean, he isn't profiled as someone who's going to command a lot of touches. 5'8", 191 pounds, pretty unathletic, maxed out at 57 touches in a college season back in 2021. So it is Etienne and it is Tank. For all intents and purposes, when you're drafting, unless something happens after this video, you should assume it's going to be Etienne and Tank Bigsby. Now, Doug Peterson did say this offseason that he wants to get Tank more touches so that they can keep Etienne healthy all season because, you know, it's not looking good if Etienne goes down and they have to like feature Tank Bigsby, right? But given how last season played out and given how few positives, honestly, how many negative things we've heard about Tank this summer and how like he is not developing in the receiving game, drops are an issue, which were an issue last season. I can't really project like a massive role change for Tank, meaning I can't project a massive role change for Etienne as well. So unless the Jaguars do go after another running back, we should feel pretty good about Travis Etienne this season. The comments about a reduced workload are concerning, and it's something we need to keep in the back of our mind, knowing they would like to reduce his workload, but given who they have, they might just really not have a choice. Like maybe they'd like to, but they also like to win football games. And so if their only option is to kind of ride Etienne, they might kind of have to do that again, unless they bring someone else in. So that's Etienne. How about Pacheco? Pacheco broke out as a rookie, 4.9 yards per carry, earning 100 more carries than both McKinnon, or like roughly, it was like 98 or 98, 99 more touches than McKinnon and Clyde. He also had almost no role in the receiving game, but he was like wildly efficient when he did get those targets. Don't quote me on it, but I think he caught like 13 of 14 targets, which is an insane catch rate, and he was like super efficient with those targets. So he was just awesome whenever they used him as a rookie, but they had McKinnon, and they even used Clyde a little bit more in the receiving game as well. So despite how efficient Pacheco was, they kind of mixed those two in his rookie season. In year 2, Pacheco saw his workload increase, almost exclusively taken from McKinnon. Clyde had one less carry, one less target than the year prior. He was used the exact same way, but they basically just took workload from McKinnon and they gave it, and that was his age 31 season, right? Going to age 32 season this year. If he ever came back, he is still a free agent. We should assume McKinnon is not going to be on the team this year. They basically took that workload and they gave it to Pacheco. That resulted in 249 touches for Isiah Pacheco, including 44 receptions on only 49 targets and 9 touchdowns, thanks to a dominant role in the red zone. Pacheco handled 58.3% of the team's red zone carries, which was 7th among all players. His role inside the 10 and 5 were a little bit lower, so he drops in that ranking, but that wasn't because of another running back. It was because of Mahomes. So they weren't taking Pacheco off the field. We just know, of course, Mahomes is really good. He's going to take the scrambles when they are available, and they're going to throw the ball at a decent rate when they get there. This season, we should honestly expect more of the same. The only backups are Clyde, Deneric Prince, Keontae Ingram. That's not really a good room. Like, Pacheco is clearly the most talented among those running backs. None of them are threats in even close to the same way that McKinnon was. McKinnon was the really big one because McKinnon was someone that was really good in the receiving game, so they would take Pacheco off the field. Those are huge snaps, especially on Kansas City. But also in the red zone, they liked how explosive McKinnon was, and so they would bring him onto the field for specific packages. So even when McKinnon wasn't playing a ton of snaps, he was taking away like the most valuable snaps. Those 3 running backs they now have behind Pacheco are not going to do that, and so we're going to see a really strong role for Pacheco this season. Last year, McKinnon missed 8 games, including the playoffs. Pacheco played in 7 of those 8 games. He got 17.8 carries, 3.7 targets per game, which he caught 96% of. That is a season-long pace of over 360 touches, and he scored 18.4 half PPR points per game over that time, which would have been more than Mostert for 3rd among all running backs last season. You compare that to the 11 games he played with Jerick McKinnon. He averaged 3.2 fewer carries in those games, 0.6 fewer targets, and the real kicker, 7 fewer half PPR points per game. Now, a lot of that was due to touchdowns. And again, as we've said many times, there's a lot of variance to touchdowns. Even when you have a strong roll or a bad roll, you can get super lucky in a bad roll or super unlucky in a good roll, and we can just see touchdown variance happen year over year. But in the 11 games he played with McKinnon, he only scored 4 times. 7 games without him, he scored 8 times. And again, I think there's variance there, but I also think we should recognize the upside to where they were throwing McKinnon onto the field a lot when they got into the red zone. That's a super valuable area when you're on the Kansas City Chiefs. If Pacheco is just going to be on the field more when they get close, he's going to have a better chance of scoring touchdowns, right? That should just make sense. He has, the upside to rack up 12, 13, 14, 15 touchdowns this season if he's going to be on the field in the red zone at a much higher rate. So I can see why you all requested this one, because it really is a brutal decision between these two. And we haven't even thrown Josh Jacobs into the mix yet, who I really like as a player. It is a very difficult decision for these three. But let's break down Jacobs, and then we'll somehow rank all 3 of these running backs. Jacobs, he'll be entering his 6th season in the NFL, but since he was a really young rookie, he's actually only a year older than both Pacheco and Etienne. I think the community views Jacobs as a lot older than he is, but he's actually slightly less than a year older than Travis Etienne, despite having played 3 more seasons. A common response to that is yes, but Jacobs is like an older running back for his age, right? Because age isn't everything for running backs, it's also touches. And the more touches you get, the quicker you're going to break down, right? If you only have 50 touches a year, you haven't handled as much of a workload as someone who's had 300 touches. And so the 300 touch running back will break down a little bit quicker. Sure, that is true. But it's also like college exists, right? It's not like college game is completely irrelevant. Those touches matter too. And if you combine college touches into what they've had as a pro, Etienne has 1,368 college plus pro touches. Jacobs has 1,721. So yes, Jacobs has 353 more touches, but that's not that big of a gap. That's like one really strong season. I just wanted to point it out because I think it's a really big misconception that I see people make all the time. Jacobs is not old, and he truly does not have that many more career touches than someone like Travis Etienne, who the entire community views as super young, super fresh, has a bunch of years left. Like, there's really not that much of a difference between these two. It's less than a year, and it's basically 1 year of difference in touches. Anyways, now that we all know that Jacobs is not old, he's not run down, what's his story, right? Why do people like him this season? Well, in 2022, he was a league winner. He gained 2,053 total yards, scored 12 touchdowns, even on a team that went 6-11. That is very, very impressive. He was the entire offense that year. Unfortunately, last season, 2023, was a complete disaster. He held out for most of training camp. He joins the team right before the season starts, right when he gets that new contract, and he just couldn't get going all season, right? That missed time really hurt him, as we've seen with other running backs in the past. Average only 3.5 yards per carry, only 2 games over 100 rushing yards, even with extreme volume. Like, it wasn't like he was getting 10, 12 carries a game. He was getting like 20 carries every week, but it was only going for like 60 yards. The bull case is that he joined the Packers. And I think Green Bay is going to be one of the best offenses in the league this season, and is going to be a team that has really, really high upside each week. A team that we can see going out there and scoring 35, 40 points. That's a lot of touchdowns, and we obviously want high weekly ceilings for the players we're drafting. Aaron Jones had a pretty rough season last year as he battled through injuries, but he was finally healthy starting in week 16 last year. And when he ripped off 5 straight games of over 105 rushing yards. He had touch counts of 22, 21, 27, 22, 21 to close the season. With him gone and A.J. Dillon looking like, pretty much trash the last few years, Jacobs is set up to be a true league winner. That is, if they hadn't drafted Marshawn Lloyd. The appeal with Etienne and Pacheco is we look at this depth chart and there is no one that we're scared of. But I'm a little scared of Marshawn Lloyd. Like, my model projects him to be the most fantasy relevant running back in this year's draft class, and it comps him to DeAndre Swift. Then when you hear the coaching staff talk about how, they really want to get him involved in his rookie season, they want to use him as a change of pace back, they want to use him in the receiving game, it makes you a little bit concerned with Jacobs, because if he's seeing the field right away on this good of an offense and he's as explosive as he is, they might see that and be like, okay, why don't we kind of use him like Aaron Jones and use Jacobs more like AJ Dillon? And I think that's probably a worst case outcome for Jacobs. And I don't think it's actually going to happen to that extreme of a degree. But given that it's possible, it's just a little bit concerning. Like, what if they do give Lloyd even just like 6 to 8 touches a week? That's not anything crazy, right? I think that could absolutely happen when you're mixing in carries plus receptions. Well, the Packers only gave their running backs 25.6 touches per week last season. So if we sprinkle in like 2 to 3 touches a week for these like ancillary running backs plus like fullbacks, then we're only looking at 14.5 to 17.5 touches per week for Jacobs. And that's still good until we consider that only 4 teams scored fewer red zone fantasy points at the running back position than the Packers last season. And overall, they ranked 28th in points per game, which is 15.5 points per game for the running backs, because they went extremely pass heavy in the red zone. Only the Dallas Cowboys wide receivers scored more red zone fantasy points than the Packers did last season. And even the Packers tight ends, which is wild because they only had 2 rookie tight ends, even they were top 8 in points per game in the red zone. When they went to the red zone, they utilized their tight ends and their wide receivers at a very, very high degree. That is something that concerns me with Jacobs in a way that I'm not really with Etienne or Pacheco, right? Like, I'm not worried about Tank or Clyde, but I am worried about Marshawn Lloyd. And while the Chiefs and the Jaguars aren't like fantasy gold mines for running backs, they were 12th and 17th for running back scoring last season, which is way better than the Packers. And the Chiefs running backs actually scored the 4th most red zone fantasy points. You think, oh, the Chiefs get in the red zone, they throw the ball a ton, right? Well, the running backs did awesome on the Chiefs last season in the red zone. And I know things can change year over year, but as I've said before, I think Jordan Love is just like a really good quarterback. And I don't think they're going to look at the success they had last season and how he's elevating the team. I don't think they look at that and they're like, what we need to change up is less of him when we get close. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to remain very, very pass heavy. Well, that's not a good thing for Jacobs. That's a great thing for the tight ends and the wide receivers like it was last season. So for that reason, along with my concerns about Marshawn Lloyd, I think I am going to rank Jacobs last in this trio. The other 2 are honestly so difficult to decide between. At the end of the day, my gut is telling me to rank Pacheco first. The Chiefs have Brandon Thorne's 4th rated offensive line this season versus 21st for the Jaguars. And since Mahomes became the starter in 2018, Chiefs have ranked 1st, 2nd, 6th, 4th, 1st, and 14th in points per game. Over that same time, the Jaguars have been 31st, 26th, 30th. Then they got Trevor Lawrence, which then they had 32nd, 9th, and 15th. So improving, but I think everyone watching this video can kind of understand that the Chiefs have a higher ceiling, higher floor, higher average outcome. I'd be pretty surprised if they scored fewer points than the Jaguars. So while I think Etienne has a higher touch ceiling, like a 95th percentile touch ceiling, I think he's the more explosive player in terms of like ability to rip off like an 80-yard touchdown. We do have those comments that his coaching staff has made about pulling back his touches, combined with having a much worse offensive line, almost certainly a lower scoring offense, and a team that's very likely going to win fewer games, which is also a negative for running backs. So I'm going to rank these 3, Pacheco, Etienne, then Josh Jacobs. But I do want to point out that all 3 of them are very, very strong picks this season, all have elite ceilings. And if you do start off wide receiver, and you're looking for a great running back option in round 3, I do think all are in consideration. Wouldn't have a problem drafting any of them. But again, if all three are on the board and you want to take one, I would do Pacheco, then Etienne, then Josh Jacobs. So let me know what you think the ranking should be in the comment section below, and also what trio you think I should do next week, and upvote the responses you agree with. Also, if you want to see exactly where I have these three players ranked, along with my exact detailed projections for every single player, you can see that on my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. If you watched this far, then be sure to hit the like button. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to hit subscribe as well and click the bell icon next to subscribe so you don't miss any of these free videos. I'll be back tomorrow with another video. That, my friends, is in this one, and thanks for watching.